welcome to episode 15 of Your Hearth at Home. My name is Tara, and I am so grateful that you are here. Today, I am so excited to be speaking with Shannon of Ceiba Tree Yoga. She has been a practitioner of yoga for over 20 years, a teacher for over 10 years, and is continually engaging in additional education, especially around how the practice of yoga can be trauma-informed and accessible to a wider range of practitioners. Today, as was voted on by the From the Hearth collective on Facebook, Shannon and I chat about anxiety. Shannon shares about her experience with trauma and how her asana, or her yogic movement practice, has helped her progress on her healing journey on many different levels. From where she started with a more rigid regime to now a very soft and invitational flow. She also shares other tools that she employs around anxiety and how she creates space to tune into being safe in our body, our intuition, and to what actually serves us in each moment. Now, I had planned on our chat being the first live interview into our collective group on Facebook, but we ran into technical difficulties. So we recorded the interview as you'll have experienced in the previous episodes on this podcast show. The difference with this one is that you will be able to head to the private Facebook group and watch the video of our conversation. When you join this group, you will also be able to participate in future live stream podcast interviews and become a part of our vibrant community. So this is why you'll hear reference to technical difficulties and to see if we had any audience questions. This episode is such a gift, and I am very grateful to Shannon for sharing so openly and eloquently about her personal experiences with anxiety. I hope that you enjoy. Welcome back to Your Hearth at Home. I am so very grateful to be here today with Shannon of Ceiba Tree Yoga. She has been practicing yoga for over 20 years, teaching for over 10 years. She has continued her studies in yoga around trauma and embodied practice. She has been delving into the world of spirituality with Angela Pryder of Shamanic Yoga, West Coast Shamanic. I am so very grateful for you to be here with us today, Shannon.
Well, thanks for having me today. I'm super excited as well, and nervous and anxious.
Well, and it's just so interesting because you said yes to this, which I'm so very grateful for. You said yes to trying to get this as a live interview, our first live interview on the podcast, and you said yes. And then now here we are just trying to navigate all kind of technical difficulties. And we're back to pre-recorded.
All good. It's all good.
Thank you. Thank you for managing this kind of, as we talk about anxiety.
I know. Talk about bringing some anxiety up today.
Right? Oh my goodness. I have a candle for our group that I'll light. And I would love to start by asking you about your journey, about how you came to where you are now, how you maybe even came to yoga, and then how you came to teaching, and kind of how this journey has brought you here today.
Mm-hmm. It was probably about 25 years ago when I went to my first yoga class, and I was pretty young. I was probably early 20s, and my mom had taken me to a class, and there was just something about it that I enjoyed. Like, I just felt this peace and calm. And so I would say that over that first 10 years, maybe, I dabbled in and out with some yoga. I started practicing sporadically. And then after I had my kids, some of the other ways that I was dealing with stress and anxiety, like going to the gym and running and being super active, wasn't supporting me. It was creating more fatigue and more tiredness, and it wasn't helping. So I committed to a yoga practice from there, a regular yoga practice. And it was in that time I was working in a very sort of high stress job with 2 little kids. And I kind of had these 3 things happen to me, and I won't explain it because it's sort of like I can't even remember most of them now, but these 3 things happened and I decided to sign up for yoga teacher training. Sorry, that's my cat scratching his post. That's how he releases anxiety. So I decided to take my yoga teacher training and just see where it would lead me. And within that first year, I left my full-time job to teach yoga and spend some more time, quality time with my kids as they were really young. So it really supported me in that way. And then, my yoga teaching has evolved since then. It's been about 12 years and 13 years maybe now. My practice was very physical, very alignment based, very sort of a rigid practice, and also for teaching. And as I've evolved and I've changed and continued to change, I found trauma-informed yoga, trauma-sensitive yoga, and some more, some gentler practices. Hi. I know. You're not talking to me. Just pay attention to me. Sorry. So I just found I found myself healing. I had just embarked in a healing journey for myself through West Coast Shamanic, and I had found that there was a different level of awareness within my own body, and my own practice was changing. And then my own teaching started to shift and change naturally to give some choices instead of having such a rigid practice. And that's when, and then shortly after that, I found out about yoga outreach, and I wanted to become a volunteer to give back and be of service. So I did some training, and I realized that the training was very much about, coming into your body to heal and to work with old trauma and anxiety and stress. And there was this language of choice, this invitational language that I was really drawn to. So I've continued on with some studies with the trauma center, trauma sensitive yoga. I was supposed to do an in-depth training this September, which I pulled out of just because of the situation in the world right now. So I'm going to continue to evolve this teaching and this practice for myself and for my students. So that's my yoga journey.
Yeah, and it's just so beautiful to see the evolution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what was it about the invitational language, do you think, or that embodied practice? Like, what does that have to do? What makes that different from the more rigid practice, as you say?
Mm-hmm. Well, when we're given, when we've experienced situations in our life, whether it's trauma or situations when we didn't have choice, I found that sometimes in yoga that perpetuated that same idea. It's like I had to look a certain way. My body had to be aligned in a certain way. And even though it served a certain purpose, it created a lot of anxiety and stress that I wasn't getting it right. Or people weren't getting it right. Or it implied to me that there was this idea of perfection that I was just never going to attain. And so with choice and offering choice to other people, they feel a sense of empowerment around their bodies, listening and tuning into their bodies, because every time I come on my mat, I feel different, and everybody does. So maybe today I'm going to choose something different than I did yesterday based on that. And opening the door for people for choice is so empowering, and it allows people, maybe sometimes for the first time in their life, to feel like they have permission to do what's right for them in the present moment. Yeah, so that's really key for me, is offering choice. And then also to um, with the embodiment piece, it's, there's so many times I've been on my yoga mat, and at the end of the practice, like, I couldn't probably tell you what I did. I just moved. And sometimes I want to maybe disassociate and not be there and not be aware of what's going on. But the more that I tune into my body and have this awareness of the sensations, the feelings, the discomfort, the things that feel easeful, it it allows me to understand what's going on for me in each moment. It really allows me to understand my body, and even just like how in feeling, and just accepting that each moment I'm going to feel different. I'm going to, whether it's physically or mentally or emotionally, and just allow some of that to be moved. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I could imagine just that alone really transcends off of the mat. Is that in your experience when you can take these types of lessons into the world?
Yeah, and I mean, that's the beauty of this practice. It's you know it's practicing something in a space where you're potentially on your mat by yourself. If you're behind, say, on a Zoom meeting or a Zoom class, or in a small studio space, you're practicing these pieces where you're given choice. You take choices that support you, and then you're going to take you're going to build on that and use that in your everyday life. Yeah.
And so sometimes in my experience with anxiety, sometimes I find it helpful to actually be told what to do, because sometimes I don't actually know what I want.
Right. I think like one of the key learnings that I've learned through trauma informed and trauma sensitive yoga is to not overwhelm with choice. So one of the principles we have is giving an A B choice. So choose, here's choice A and choice B. But of course, I always start a practice letting people know that outside of those choices, if there's something else that's working for them, but I won't overwhelm people with multiple choices, because then people kind of get stuck not knowing which choice to take. Yeah. And so when you have choice A or B, perhaps it's easier to make an informed choice in that moment. What's going to support me the best?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense. And in terms of managing, so when we practice trauma informed yoga and we have these tools that we start to cultivate, and this awareness that we start to cultivate, if we're not on our mat, um, do you have any recommendations for how to manage when triggers come up, when anxiety comes up within us, tools that you might work with, just in your experience?
Definitely. I'm thinking in particular for me is when I'm driving. Um, Driving for me is like, I'm just going to say it. If you see me out there and I'm acting like a total idiot and I'm road raging, I really apologize in advance. Like, driving is definitely a major trigger for me. And I'm really learning to be with it and just notice. But yeah, there's always an opportunity to pause, maybe take 2, 3, 4 breaths. And in that 2, 3, 4 breaths for myself, anyways, I will notice my body. I'll notice my feet or whatever. So I'll come back into my body, because oftentimes when I'm experiencing anxiety, it's like a part of me is either, I want to say it's like scattered, right? Like pieces of myself are scattered all over the place. And so I'm not really here, and I'm not in the present moment. and being scattered and frazzled, or whatever word you want to call it. The way I envision it is that, like, I've kind of left my body, I've left the present moment. So for me, coming back to just taking a few simple breaths, sometimes it's repeating like an affirmation or a mantra or whatever practice you have around that, just to bring yourself back fully. Yeah. So the breath is key. And when I'm not on my yoga mat, I mean, there's other pieces for me to help with anxiety. Yoga's one piece of that. Getting out in nature, somewhere that's maybe less busy and noisy and calming, maybe near a river or a lake or in the forest or wherever you feel connected to nature. It could be a park near your house. Maybe putting your feet in the grass, or petting my cat. There's like so many ways to bring myself back into the present moment and to come back into my body.
Yeah, so this emphasis around present moment awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. And just remembering, because for me, I'm often in fear, which lays in the future, or
Yes.
in regret, which lays in the past.
Yes.
So, yeah, just coming back to the present moment. Thank you. Yeah, that's really key. And then these other tools, right? And we all get to find our own tools. So, yeah, thank you. Is there?
There's definitely, I mean, for some people that, I mean, and I want to say the breath is probably something that we all have, right? So, yoga doesn't necessarily need to even be on a mat. Yoga doesn't have to actually be movement. There's so many layers to that. We could maybe take a whole podcast to talk about that. But sometimes I even put on some music that's calming or uplifting. And that just sometimes will just help to ease things as well. I'm not sure what other things that you experience, or however other ways, but meditation, it depends on how the anxiety feels for me. If it's really supercharged, maybe moving first and then coming into meditation is helpful. But if I'm supercharged and trying to sit still, I get really restless and sort of fidgety, and I find it really challenging. So there are sort of layers to that. Do you know what I'm saying?
I do. That's such an important distinction to make, because the way the anxiety is experienced will inform which tool we use to manage it. So that's a really, really important thing to name. Yeah, when I'm hyper, I do find it extremely difficult to sit in meditation. Versus if I'm having anxiety where I'm in this freeze mode,
Yes.
it's easier for me to sit because I'm already frozen.
Totally. Totally.
Yeah, thank you for naming that. Yeah, I appreciate that. And so as you've navigated your own anxiety journey,
Mm-hmm.
has there been particular guides or teachers that have kind of influenced you, or had pieces that really landed for you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think first of all was just being aware and naming what was going on for me was anxiety, and then also understanding trauma, and some layers of trauma, and understanding as well that um, everybody has some kind of trauma that they've experienced. So the other piece is also recognizing that I'm not unique, that what I'm experiencing, other people experience, and I'm sure um, many people experience way more than me, and some people less, or whatever. So there's no, like, I don't feel like I'm special and have anxiety, or experience trauma or anxiety. But I do feel like there's been some pivotal moments in my life. Yoga, if if you'd asked me 10 years, 15 years ago about yoga, I wouldn't be able to tell you that this is um, the yoga practice helped ease my anxiety. Like I knew it did something for me, but I couldn't name what that was. So yoga is a piece for me that so it's a teacher. Yoga's been a big teacher for me, a huge teacher. And I've had many yoga teachers, but I wouldn't say there's one that as that I can pinpoint to say is like somehow, except for with the trainings and the deeper level of awareness around trauma with yoga outreach and with the trauma sensitive yoga trauma center. Definitely my work in the shamanic realm has definitely helped to sort out past trauma and anxiety, and as well being in recovery and letting go of any kind of substance or alcohol has really supported me in living in the present moment, living one day at a time, and really looking deeper at some stuff. Yeah, so just really uncovering layers. And I guess, I've always been like a seeker of understanding what's going on with me, right? And so there's been so many moments, but definitely removing alcohol from my life was key, because I also grew up in with alcoholism in my family. So that was a huge piece. And like that recovery journey is endless, but amazing. Coming to yoga and bringing that awareness into my life, the piece of like being okay in my body, feeling safe in my body. Because for many years, I didn't feel safe in my body. I didn't feel safe as a woman. I didn't feel safe in society, because society had this idea of who I should be, what I should look like. And so, yeah, key piece of loving myself is being years and years on my yoga mat. And that's, interesting in itself, because the yoga in North America, if you look on Google yoga poses, you see like super bendy white women that look awesome, and that's not me. So that took a long time to let go of feeling like yoga was only if I could do this and look like that. So that's been a huge piece of where I've landed in terms of teaching, to create an inclusive space for anybody, no matter what you look like, what you can do, if you're able-bodied or not, or whatever. Yeah, so big journey.
And that's a huge piece of reducing anxiety.
Yes.
Because when I go to a yoga class and I feel like I'm expected to hit this kind of ideal, like it brings up things. So having those safer spaces where we can just come with whatever we are, understanding that what you described, the bendy white woman on Google, like that's not yoga, right?
Yeah.
At all. Like that's just not it. So thank you for creating these spaces where people can come to experience, because yoga itself can be a trigger.
Yes.
It is for me. Like the asana practice, the fitness based asana practice is extremely unappealing to me.
Right. Yeah.
And so to create a space where yoga can be redefined is
And I
amazing.
feel like there's a yoga for everybody. Like I'm not saying that, this bendy person that looks awesome is doing something wrong either, because that's who that person is. But I don't feel like that should be the model of what yoga is, because yoga comes in, especially the asana, the physical practice, has so many different aspects or avenues. Or, I mean, I could be sitting in my chair breathing and calling it yoga. So yeah, I feel like there's something for every person. And if you've tried yoga once and you didn't connect with it, um, explore some other places, some other people. Yeah.
Yeah. And what do you think about this transition? So we've gone from this studio life to
Mm.
now a lot of online offerings. How do you feel like, do you feel like it's more accessible for those who might not have had the, like, who may have had anxiety holding them back?
Oh, definitely. Some of the feedback I have received I had a few people start yoga. I mean, I'm calling this yoga, right? Okay, so let's just be clear. Yoga is like, I'm calling this the movement practice of yoga. But I
Yeah.
definitely had a few people reach out to me and start this physical practice online, um, and say what's held them back in the past is a fear or anxiety around stepping into a space that is unknown, um, or that they feel awkward because they don't know it, they don't know anything about it, and they don't want to look silly, or they don't want to be embarrassed because they don't know what's going on, or even hurt themselves, or even just feel welcomed in a space that, um, where everybody else seems to know what they're doing except for them.
Mm,
Yeah. And that's their perception of that, right? So being able to be in their bedroom or their living room and move their bodies and just start to connect their breath with their bodies and see how that feels online has been an access point for some people, definitely.
mm,
And, speaking of walking into an unknown space, like, definitely this is like a big, big piece of anxiety for many people, is walking into the unknown, whether that's meeting new people, starting a new job, going to a new place that you haven't been before. Um, these are all things that create anxiety for many of us. There's been times when I've taught at a studio for 10 years, and I'll go and sub a class for somebody else. And even though I've taught in that space, it feels like a different space all of a sudden because I'm teaching for and that even creates anxiety for me. Um, so being able to reduce barriers for people to access. Um, so I think that this online, online yoga's been here for a while, but I think we all got kind of forced to find new ways, and finding new ways, um, can create anxiety, right? So, so interesting. Until sometimes I feel like, unless I'm like, I was kind of put to the tipping point. I had people asking me to start doing some online yoga 5 years ago, and it was like, whoa, that seems scary and unnecessary. But here we were at this pivotal moment, and I didn't even think twice about it. It was just like, okay, it's time to do this.
mm.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that kind of getting pushed to that point, like even like for anything, even if it's just for us to start our healing or growth or development, whatever you want to call that journey, just to get on that path. Like some people, like I'll speak for myself, like I had to be pushed to the very limit
Mm-hmm.
so that I had no other way to go. But to delve into this kind of thing, like maybe like similar idea, less extreme for you moving online with yoga, right? Like it was just like, yep, now it's time, this is the way to go. um and so it's like, so for folks who are not pushed to the extreme, but they're in discomfort, perhaps like they're managing some things but they're not at the point where there's no other way. Do you have any words for those people, just encouragement or thoughts, just to start to invest in themselves before they have to invest in themselves.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like yeah, I do for sure. There's some things that I feel like for myself, and this could be universal or not, but sometimes the thing that stops me from doing something is I feel like I need to be perfect at it
Mm.
before I've even started. I mean, I use this analogy all the time. Like yoga is a practice, and um, when we practice something, we things shift and grow and move and change. And I used to use the analogy of like people associate practicing the piano. It's like a thing. Like the more you practice, you sound, more fluid, or maybe you learn some new things, or you can whatever. It's the same. It's like anything. I feel like we just need to start somewhere and just take a tiny little step and not think of the final outcome, because the final outcome is just a projection of an assumption or a fear or an ideal or something that that we put on ourselves. And I know for myself, I feel like, or I used to feel like, I don't as much anymore, I would put this huge amount of pressure on myself to be perfect at something before I'd even tried it. And that's unrealistic. So letting go of perfectionism or fear of being judged, or not being enough, or um, and just trusting, like I mean trusting your intuition. If you're feeling called to try something, I always believe that there's something there for it. And it may not be that this is a lifelong thing for you, but maybe there's some lesson there that's super key to you, to your growth. um the path of growing is scary though, right? Because that means that as soon as we step on, things are going to change, and change is scary for people. um and but I also believe in growth, and change comes freedom, happiness, liberation, all those things. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, and this is something that we're all kind of being, at least, well, many people, I shouldn't say we all, but many people are being alerted to um, items, pieces within that get to have some attention and maybe be healed in this time when so much has shifted in the world. And this is where anxiety can really take a head when we haven't maybe experienced it before. Maybe some people, this is a really big first awakening.
Mm.
And so just tuning in and noticing what's present. And it's a lot of work to try to find things online when we don't even know what we're looking for. So
So true.
yeah, so just wanting to say that, and just tuning into, investing the time in looking for things, I guess.
Yeah, and
Because
asking other people. Like I feel that some of the when I'm trying to do things on my own and find things on my own, it's so much more work than reaching out, asking other people for help, or asking people, do you know somebody that? And things just continue to unfold as I allow myself to be vulnerable like that. um, I was going to add on to, we haven't really talked about resting very much, but we've talked a lot about movement. I feel like rest is such a key piece when things aren't clear. Just pause, take a rest. Um, or if you've been in a period of growth and action and movement, it's okay to stop and just be and take a rest. This is such a key learning for me this last couple years, because I had so much anxiety, but I didn't know how to rest. I didn't know how to truly just turn things off. And I still have a hard time with that. Like my go-to is to be moving and going, and then I hit a burnout, right? But before I hit that burnout, if I can find a moment to pause, restorative yoga is really great for that, or meditation is really great for that. Um, Yeah. I don't know, maybe have some other ideas around rest.
Well, like I'm just so glad you mentioned this because it's so important and it's something that I mean, in my recovery journey when I um stopped drinking, I started being busy and I just overloaded my schedule and I was going, 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 going. There was no rest for 2 years. And so I was sober for 2 years. Well, sober in quotations. I think I was actually more dry because I wasn't actually taking care of my actual problems. And I was approaching burnout. I was
Mm.
approaching relapse because I wasn't resting. I wasn't taking care of the actual issues. And so that's a huge piece for me, like rest. And it continues to be. It is very present for me in this time. So I really and the other thing that's, with the things that you've talked about, rest, perfectionism, these are all pieces of dominant culture, which I name as white supremacist culture. Which, when we do these things, when we choose to rest, when we choose to let go of perfectionism, when we choose to move on this healing journey where we embrace change, we move to actually dismantle this culture that's actually holding us out of healing. And so I really appreciate you saying that, and especially amidst all that's present in the world with the uprisings, and this momentum that has been created, that we get to keep going. Like, I'd love to just ask if there's anything that you'd like to share on that, this momentum, or if there's any BIPOC voices that you know of that you'd like to uplift or elevate, or just anything in regards to anxiety yoga in relation to Black Lives Matter, but also just dismantling of white supremacy in general as well.
Oh, for sure. I mean, there there really is so much out there right now, and I love that. I love that this is so prominent right now. And if you connect to what I was saying about perfectionism and resting and having a hard time, because we really did grow up with this like over culture, this dominant culture, or we all have. It's been around for centuries, I guess, of doing more. It gives you like a status symbol of some sort. The more that you're doing, the more you have, the more you more somehow relates to who you are, which is total crap. Sorry, it's total bull. And yeah, dismantling these pieces and coming into our true self, our true power. And as one of my teachers says, coming back to our sovereignty is so key, because it's like we've been fed this farce for far too long, and it's killing people. And look at how many people are stressed, and we're dealing with lots of mental illness, lots of drug and alcohol addiction, a lot of addiction in general, because we don't feel like we're good enough ever. So I just had to go on that little rant. I could probably go on for a while. I'm going to cut myself off before I go too deep into this, because I didn't want to make this like a political topic. But
It's not political, in my opinion. I
yeah,
believe it's like human health
yes,
issues.
totally. And I feel very and it's and not even just around I mean, I know I've learned about my own white privilege and what that means, and what it means to be a white cisgendered woman in this society. And um and there's so many populations of people. it's around the Black Lives Matter to me is just like the tipping point, and we're talking about all sorts of marginalized communities. There's so many, and everybody's a person. Every person is a person. We all are people. That's just the bottom line. Some of the work that I've done with yoga outreach has been super key at educating me on multiple issues around decolonization and in some of our indigenous communities, and elevating just populate all sorts of populations. I did a workshop with Miss Michelle Cassandra Johnson, and I know you have as well, and I did bring the book. I have the book here, Skill in Action, and so I'm super excited to dive into this. So if anyone's interested in a little bit more about the yoga practice and taking some action and learning a bit more, that's a really good resource, I know. And then the Yoga is Dead podcast with Tejal Yoga and Giselle Yogawala. The first episode I ever listened to was The White Woman Killed Yoga. And, it's so interesting because I really do still, as a white woman teaching yoga, I'm really struggling to call it yoga. And I've said that a few times already tonight, because I'm not a South Asian woman teaching yoga. And so these are things that I need to look at and be aware of. And this is like a practice that I feel connected to, but I'm not, I'm just going to leave it at that. But there's lots of resources out there around yoga, for sure. And that's not to just also say, like, as a white woman, I've also experienced trauma personally. Generational trauma has happened in my family. And so I don't want to also discount that, my own experience, and say that if you're white and like you still have a story and experiences that shaped your life, but you don't also have the other layers of all of these other pieces, perhaps, right? That can be barriers for people. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate that. It's very on my heart too, and these resources that you're sharing are so amazing. I'm going to quickly take a look at our group and check in if anybody has asked any questions about yoga and anxiety. It doesn't look like we've got any. So I would just love to ask if there is anything else that you are hoping or called to share about anything in general, that you feel just needs to be left in the space.
Sure. So I did write some notes. I've been looking down because I do have some anxiety, so I do need to have some little pieces to make sure I don't completely leave my body and freeze, because when I freeze, I'm like a deer in headlights. I did want to also mention, like, I've done some studies, but I'm not claiming to be an expert on anxiety or yoga or trauma or anything. I'm on a learning journey, and I will continue to learn. I'm speaking mostly from my own experiences in life, and my own experience with anxiety and yoga, and how it's helped me. It's really transformed my life. It's really, in ways that I probably couldn't even verbalize and don't even understand quite yet. But I do know that moving my body in an intentional way, like yoga, there's probably other movement practices that are just as effective. It really helps to shift some heavy energy, and that could be stuck places, anxious places, or places where I feel really lethargic or stuck and I can't take a step forward. So being in that freeze response, maybe being in that hyper vigilant or hyperactive place of anxiety and trauma. So the practice of yoga for me helps to get me connected to myself. It's really got me to learn who Shannon is, who I am. It's really brought me home to myself. And I can notice sometimes where the anxiety is sitting even in my body, and using my breath and some of the movement to just help some of that move and flow out, so that it's not just sitting there stuck, stagnant, and just building and building and building and building. And of course, I mean, I need support too. There's certain things I can do for myself, but I see other practitioners. I go to massage, I see an osteopath, I go to I've done some somatic healing and therapy and everything else. So it's all a combination, but there's things that you can do or I can do on my own to support myself without always seeking out words. Mm-hmm.
Mm. I so appreciate that. Uh, just coming home to self, my heart's just singing. Oh, that's gorgeous. Thank you. And where can we find you if we would like to try some of your offerings around stress and anxiety?
Well, Ceiba Tree Yoga is on Facebook and Instagram, and I have a website, so ceibatreeyoga.ca. I have some specific classes for anxiety and stress starting in the fall. I am offering a free trial class for people coming up in a couple weeks. I think it's on September 3rd. So if people are curious, and all it takes is a curiosity and then some willingness to try. If you're willing to try and you're curious, come let me know, and we'll get you set up. And like I said, it could be for you, it may not be, but you could always try.
Yeah, it's then you know, right?
Yeah, and then this may be for you right now, or it may plant a seed for something else down the road. Who knows?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I just want to thank you so much
Mm.
for taking the time to be here to share your embodied experience. It really means a lot to be able to hear someone's story, because that then we can really connect and relate. And so I want to thank you for sharing your story, for being willing to say yes to doing this on video, and to be able to share with people face to face, hopefully a bit more of a connection. And I just want to thank you for managing with the technical difficulties also. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. When you asked me and you told me it was going to be this week, yeah, that's my anxiety. I was like, okay, I'm going to get out of my comfort zone now. So this definitely was, getting out of my comfort zone and trying something a little bit different. So thank you for asking me, and thanks for having me here. So great to connect with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Shannon is such an amazing soul. I have personally taken her classes, and they are truly an invitation to sink into the present moment, to relax into my body, and to give it what it actually needs. Please make sure that you check out her offerings. I'm sure that the free class will fill up quickly, so get on that right away. And she also has some beautiful nature yoga combination offerings coming up, which look wonderful. And let me know, how are you enjoying these episodes so far? Do you have someone who you want to hear in this space, or do you have a question that you are looking to have answered? Please connect with me on social media. And be sure to join the From the Hearth Collective on Facebook to be involved in future episodes. All links are in the show notes. I am sending you so much love, and I will see you next week.